Well, it's great to welcome back Dean Pohlman, Man Flow Yoga. Man, it's good to see you again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me again.
And I know from you were on the past, just talking about the importance of how we look at our health and how yoga actually does help us as men, because that's
Mhm.
your journey is a great one in the sense that yoga, why would I do that? And then you like try it,
Right,
like, man, this is a serious workout. This is actually,
right.
and there's a lot of other benefits. So I think we might build off of that today, Dean, but there's also an element of how do we also look as a whole of just, here we are 2025 moving into a new year, and the importance of just our health, our well-being as men,
Mm.
the roles we play. I'd love it if you just kind of riff on that for a while.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the resistance that I hear about from men and self-care is, well, I've got to take care of other people. I've got other responsibilities. And I think the most important thing to remember is if you are not taking good care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of others. I think there's a lot, that's reasoning and logic is one thing. Going deeper and understanding, well, why is there internal resistance for you when it comes to taking care of yourself, right? So like what is the shadow in there, right? Like
Right.
let's go into the deeper therapy stuff, and that stuff is, that's where the transformation can happen. But yeah, I think men taking care of themselves is obviously a good step, and recognizing that exercise is a great way to do that, because it can lead to a cascade of other
Hmm.
lifestyle changes, right? When you're exercising more, you think about your decisions more. You're more mindful of what you eat. Your stress levels are better. Your sleep gets better, which helps with everything. If you're lucky and you keep it up for a while, your body starts to look better.
Hmm.
And so but there's a reason why sticking with an exercise program is so hard. There's a lot of stuff working against you. It's just the way that our society is set up. It can be difficult to be
Hmm.
consistent with exercise. I did a conversation with one guy at one point, or Anthony Balduzzi from Fit Father Project, and his whole focus is on weight loss. And one of the things that we talked about is it's just recognize that you are operating at level hard, right? If this was a game, this isn't like easy or beginner mode. You just go
Right.
straight to hard.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's important to remember when you're trying to make changes, that it just is hard, right? It's so if you can go into it thinking this is going to be hard, it's not going to be easy, just being realistic with your expectations going in, I think that can make it a lot easier. And then something that I'm talking a lot about within my own community right now is this idea of 28-day challenges, or
Yeah.
creating goals with a fixed timeline. Because if the goal is, okay, I'm just going to live a healthy lifestyle forever,
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
overwhelming. And I know a lot of guys have the all or nothing mentality, and so they get into week two and they're like, well, I didn't do it, so I'm just going to give up entirely.
It's all ruined.
Right, right. And then when you have that fixed timeline in mind, it makes it more doable. It makes it seem
Hmm.
less overwhelming. And if you can stick with something for 28 days, that's usually enough time for you to decide, oh, okay, this is working, or it's not working. In which case,
And doesn't that
something else.
also fit into the mantra of it's almost like the game mentality? That's level one of hard is 28 days. And then level two of hard is the next 28 days. And I want to get
Yeah,
to level two.
yeah, yeah. And and ideally, the hardest part, the biggest lift is level one, right? Because
Hmm.
that's the part where you're just proving to yourself, I can do this. But when you're successful with level one, you get kind of excited about, oh,
Yeah.
well, I did level one. Can I do level two? Right?
Right.
How can I build upon this? And I think a lot of us go straight to the, well, let me get to phase 10 of what I want this to look like, and I'm just going to aim for it right now.
Yeah.
And instead, what we should be doing is really focusing on building this baseline of consistency. And even if that baseline, that phase one, even if that doesn't lead to the results that you want, it is building something that we can build more phases on top
Hmm.
of, which is going to eventually lead to, you know, the results that you
Hmm.
want and the change that you want.
And that's the importance, like you said earlier,
consistency.
of reframing some of this to where it's that idea of, what we try to do at Sex and Marriage Radio is reframe the concept that marriage is not always going to be easy. It's not always hard work either, but it's not
Hmm.
what's depicted in Hollywood and Hallmark, right? It's
Yeah.
there's a different underbelly that goes on when you're living with another human being. Well, the same thing happens in your world in the
Hmm.
sense of it's I know full well going into this, it's going to require this, this, and this, and this, but I maybe have glamorized it rather than look at it as the reality
Hmm.
of I'm choosing my hard here, right?
Hmm.
I'm choosing my struggle here because that's the reality of life in the way I see it is I can struggle by getting up every day and taking care of my fitness, or I will struggle in how I view myself and how frustrated I am that I'm not doing
Yeah.
anything to take care of my fitness. Well, which one do I want to choose?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I think sometimes there's a perception that if I, for people looking in at, the lifestyle that I try to promote, and there's a lot of, maybe there's a lot of shame or there's a lot of guilt, or they just haven't gotten to the point where it's bad enough yet, where they're
Hmm.
kind of ready to make that jump. Like, I wish things would be better. I know I wish that I wish that I was healthier. I wish that I ate better. I wish that I, could lose about 10 to 20 pounds, but they just haven't gotten to the point yet to have that firsthand visceral experience that makes them want to make the change. So, I don't try to force people to get started or to make the change. I'm like, you're not ready yet, and that's totally fine. Like, maybe you want to do something, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna try and force you into something that you're not ready yet. For I think most guys will eventually get to that point, and it could be, maybe they wake up one day and they look in the mirror and they're like, what happened? Or
Right.
they could have a scary doctor visit, or maybe they've just gotten to the point, as we get older, we're not worried about knee injuries from playing sports. We're worried about turning wrong in the shower and like, oh, my back, right? So maybe it's
Getting out of bed wrong. Right.
right, right, yeah. So maybe it's an event like that, that kind of shocks you into, I need to change things because, I want to be around for my family. I don't
Hmm.
want to be worried. I also don't want to be a burden on them as I get older. And you want to live independently for as long as you possibly can. You want to be able to enjoy your last quarter, your last third of your
Hmm.
life, and travel and be able to physically do things and not have to worry about doctor's visits and pain and, medications and yeah. But you got to get
Yeah.
to that point first where you're
No,
like,
well, yeah. I mean,
you
that's
know,
I refer to that as it's critical mass, right?
okay,
That's what
yeah.
creates the element of okay, this is serious. This is a different level. I'm not joking around anymore because we kind of dance around that phase a little bit at times where we see glimpses of it,
Hmm.
but then there's that element of you do hurt yourself and it's one of those was a non-contact non-sport injury and you're like okay wait a second, do I have the courage to actually look at the fact, I'll personalize it, do I have the courage to look at the fact that I'm 53 now, so you know what, maybe I really need to strengthen that area up, maybe I need to be more diligent about how I look at that particular aspect of my life, and what do I need to do, and then you start asking better questions which then lead you to better answers. I mean, that's kind of, I think of your journey and from the very first time we spoke when we met months ago on, you were a college athlete and working out but you had the regimen that you thought that's just what guys do, and then you went into a yoga class because you went into the wrong, the doorway led to the
Yeah.
like, oh, how'd I end up here, but it ended up like opened yourself up to something that you had no idea was there, and that can either come from chance or it comes from critical mass where it's like
Mm.
now I start asking better questions and I test out some things to find what really does work for me. Because I think I'm gonna speak for you here, Dean, but I'm assuming you're in the same camp as the best diet, the best workout, the best structure of how you work your day is whatever you'll stick to.
Yeah.
That's the best one. But
Right.
just do something because it makes you better, which makes everyone around you.
Yeah. And as we were talking, it kind of brought up this idea for me of what we assume to be the journey for men's health as we get older. And I think there's this idea that, when you're younger, when you're and I'm talking younger in terms of like 50s and younger. I'm not talking like 30s and younger. As you get into your 30s, things are really different. When you get into your 40s, things are different. When you get into your 50s, things get really, really different. But I think that there is this idea that exercise and the way that we think about strength training and going to the gym, there's the idea that that is for younger guys, for guys in their
Right.
30s, 40s, maybe into their 50s. But there's this just assumption that, you know what, it's kind of starting to hurt a little bit, so I'm not going to do it anymore. Like, I'm just weightlifting or strength training is no longer part of my life. And the reality is that the way that we think about exercise, it just doesn't include the exercise modalities and the movements that we need to be able to continue to do that. All we do is strength train, but what else are we doing during the day? We're sitting at a desk, right? So we need to do mobility work, we need to do flexibility work, we need to do these things that are not really considered traditional exercise, because not only do we have to fight against aging and just your body tightening up, but we also have to fight against the reality of what our bodies do all day, which is
Hmm.
sit, right? The hips get tight, your shoulders round forward, back muscles get weak, your core muscles get weak, your hip muscles get weak. You don't do any sort of back bends. There's no sort of pulling exercises with your upper back. And so, not only do we have to continue to keep up exercise, but we have to undo the negative effects of sitting and being inactive. And when you do those things together, a lot of people who do manful yoga, they find, oh, you know what? I can continue to do weight
Hmm.
training. I can continue to do the things that I enjoy doing. I just can't do the exact same thing that I was doing before, which was no flexibility work or no
Right.
mobility work, or so it just requires changing up the way you exercise. But I think it's kind of unfortunate that we think about fitness in that way, that we just get to this point and they're like, oh well, I can't do it anymore. So.
Yeah, because we've limited it. It's a preconceived notions, right? It's this idea of, well, this is the way it's supposed to go, so this is the way I'll get there, rather than wait, how do I avail myself of more
Hmm.
opportunities, differences, and I'll find what works. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm thinking of, what I think of in this conversation initially, Dean, is the idea that my wife is a CPA, so she's on the cusp of tax season, and
Hmm.
so she's tried a bunch of different things, and some of them have worked really well over the years, and some have not. And now she's into the wall Pilates, and is already seeing some results. I mean, she's been
Hmm.
doing it for like a week, and there's already an element of she's like, okay, I like this. And so every morning I'm hearing this pattern go with her because she gets up, walks past me, heads into the room where the workout stuff is, and an open wall, and gets to work. And but it's just the willingness that she has to, okay, I've heard this, I'm going to try it. Okay,
Hmm.
I've heard this, I'm going to try it. And I think sometimes we lock ourselves in like you're talking about, and we do this in relationship dynamics of, well, this didn't go the way I wanted. Oh, I guess it's just it, rather than, wait, what else could I do? What's my role in this? What are some of the things I'm not willing to look at or
Hmm.
test out to see this actually reaps more reward for me if I look at this exercise route, or if I pick up some running as well, or
Hmm.
whatever it might be. That all of it can be something that's just a strategy to propel yourself forward, because that's the point. Is
Hmm.
I'm an advocate that better people just create better communities.
Hmm.
So it starts with the people. Let's start there.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I think it brought up this idea for me that even though it's normal, that doesn't mean that it's acceptable. Right. I think a lot of us, and I was thinking about it in terms of, I think, average relationships, right? Average marriages. I think most people have I mean, you're the expert here, but I would have to assume that most people have, like a C minus or like a D marriage if they were to rate it.
Yeah, I think I came across years ago, this stat needs to get updated, but I came across there's like 15% of marriages are in the thriving category.
Okay.
And then there's like 35% or so that are in the surviving category, which leaves all the rest in the dying category.
Yeah.
And so if you
Wow.
think about it, a majority of marriages are dying or surviving.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
so like, and that's because that's right, that's normal, but I wouldn't say that's acceptable. Just like when you get, when you go through your blood results with your doctor, they're like, this is within the normal range. But what you might not know about that is within the normal range in medical conversations
Right.
means, I mean, it's not like
Yeah.
it's pretty bad. It's
Right.
pretty bad. You're not like in the we need to treat you for something yet, but that's not good.
Yeah.
The same thing with fitness. Just because it's normal doesn't mean everybody has lower back pain, right? Like everybody has lower back pain, but that's normal. But I don't think that's acceptable.
No.
With the right exercise, and you might not, the what works for everybody will not work for what works for somebody will not work for everybody else. And so when it comes to, you talked about it with your wife, with her doing wall Pilates, like it sounds like this is a really good fit for her. She's been doing it 1 week and she notices, oh, like this is actually doing something for me. So, if you're doing some type of exercise and you've been doing it for a while and you're like, it doesn't make me excited, then try and find something else. Maybe yoga isn't for you. Maybe Pilates is a better answer, which, by the way, I go to Pilates workouts with my wife. They're hard.
Yes,
They're
they are.
they're very hard. And they actually translate directly into getting you better at weightlifting and getting rid of joint pain. They do an amazing job with that. But there's so many different types of exercise. And maybe you're not someone who enjoys working out by yourself. Maybe you need to have a
Hmm.
community
Hmm.
to exercise with. Maybe you need to be in person in a group workout environment. So I think there's just so many different ways to do it that, explore things if it's not working for you. And then I think I'm going to come back to that 28-day thing that I mentioned before. But sometimes you have to do it long enough to notice the results to
Right.
actually enjoy it. So, sticking with things for trying them out for 28 days at a time is a good way to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I do this. One of the things I have found it's sort of comparable that when I run men's groups, like I run mastermind groups,
Hmm.
and the first when I first came across the idea and started doing it, they were a year long, and I found that's just too long, right? We lose momentum, we kind of wander and drift. But I have found 6 months I can do that. That's intense enough, but also long enough because we don't meet, but every other week or so, because it ends up just being 12 meetings total. But it's just, there's an element of, I've heard different guys talk about, I can do a 6 month commitment, or I could do a 3 month commitment if I'm doing something else in my life, or a 28-day commitment. Or even if you go psychologically speaking, and I'm trying to deal with some sort of a habit or addiction, sometimes I got to do it as a 24-hour commitment. So there's groups of people I know that they every morning 24 hours I commit to, and whatever it might be. I'm not looking at porn. I'm not having a drink. I'm not smoking a cigarette. I'm not whatever it could be. And then I'll
Hmm.
do it again the next day, and I'll do it again because I can handle that length of time. Because you're spot on in the sense that the human psyche, if it's too far out there, it just throws its hands up. Like, whatever, I can't reach that. Rather than, I just heard this in a book I was listening to yesterday, that we need to come to grips with the fact that when I'm driving at night, even though I can only see as far as my headlights throw out into the future, I can make it a 10-hour drive all night long, knowing all I'll see is right in front of me, but I'll still get to where I need to go
Mm.
in those increments every step of the way. I don't need the whole thing to be able to see it. I just need to see in front of me enough, and I'll end up getting where I need to go. So I think it's so good to see it as you're describing the importance. Because this is the thing, the message that I want to try to have for men, myself included in this, because why I like catching back up with you, is just a reiteration of the role I play in my life and in my marriage and in my family. That I set a tone that's different. I think husbands, are you familiar with Brant Hansen? He's been on the show a couple of times, but he made a comment in one of his books that said when a man is operating well and present, the people around him should flourish.
Mm.
Like when you're playing your role well in your home, everyone around you should flourish. And that's not
Mhm.
because you're a good dictator or what, it's just because of your presence.
Mm.
I think there's an element of truth that absolutely permeates society, that when human beings, let's just kind of go that route, are really operating well, those around them benefit.
Yeah.
They get blessed because of their presence.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, if men are being effective leaders and they are being examples of what they are trying to promote, then I think that creates this, that makes sense that they would create this natural, aura or environment that would encourage other people to
Yeah.
act in similar ways.
Yeah, because it's not about their in requiring other people to do it. I mean, I do the 3 words every year, and not New Year's resolutions. I have 3 words that kind of set my course for each year. And 3 years
Yeah.
ago now, one of my words was now.
Okay.
And that the point of it for me at that point was be in the now.
Hmm.
That's a component of it. But there's also a do what I think of or need to get done now. Like, oh, I need to send that email. Okay, get it done right now. Grab my computer, write the email, send it. I need
Hmm.
a text. I need a call. Do it right then and there. And that word kicked my butt all year. On just,
Hmm.
I've started really changing some things to where the next year, Pam's word was act, and it was based on what she saw me go through.
Mm.
That she realized, I want some of that. I need
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to say you need to do this too. It was just, this is just a better way for me to, I like how I live. And so it's kind of the same thing I think you're describing and promoting is when I can handle myself better, get in better shape, look at my well-being better, ask the better questions, it inspires those around me, particularly in
Hmm.
relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, and to the point of what you were speaking now, or act in your wife's case, I think one thing that goes unsaid in the conversation of mental overall wellness, but particularly with mental wellness, is the just the amount of extra stuff that we're carrying around in our heads. And so, like, doing things instead of doing things, leaning into that resistance of doing the things that, like, for me, I know that the best thing for me to do on my to-do list is the thing that's giving me occupying the most space
Yeah.
in my head, right? So if
Yeah.
I can do that thing, I'm going to get that out of my head, free my mind up for other things. Um, so I think that's really important. And I can't remember the second thing I was going to say, but
No
I did a
sweat.
last year I went on a solo retreat at the end of the year. So my wife recognized that the best gift that she could have given to me was just a day to myself.
Okay.
And so December 23rd, and I went to and I live in Austin, Texas. And so, in Central Texas or Hill Country, there's a lot of little cabins that
Mhm.
you can rent. So I went to this cabin, a solo cabin. I had my new puppy with me. I just gotten him like, I think a week ago. So I had this puppy with me for my solo retreat. But I ended up just journaling, reflecting, thinking about what did I do in 2023? What went well? What didn't go well? And I examined my whole life. I examined business. I examined how I conducted myself. I examined my fitness. I examined my relationship with my son, with my daughter, with my wife. And I eventually came up with 7 words. And the one that really stuck out for me was this idea of space, or creating space. I realized that I was rushing from one thing to the next and
Yeah.
not really being present in any one thing, because I was just trying to do too much. And every time I went on from one task to the next task, I didn't give myself enough time to process what had been happening before. And I bring this up because when you take time to exercise in a way that you practice body awareness and you practice focus on your breathing, that translates off of your mat or wherever you exercise, and it translates into your everyday life. So
Mhm.
you're able to show up and be more present. You're also able to have better focus. You're able to be less stressed, right? You're able to create a safer environment for people around you, have deeper connections with people, able to, take time to process your life so that you can show up and actually be present with your family, as opposed to, just sitting on the couch thinking about things that you have to do, and then
Right.
turning the TV on distract yourself rather than to check in and,
Yeah.
process things. So,
No, that's so good because I think to me, the key becomes, as I'm hearing you talk, is just how am I more aware of myself and doing what not only increases that awareness, but also benefits myself from what I'm learning. Right. I'm making the tough decisions. I'm being disciplined. I'm being structured if that works for me. Or I'm doing these things that carve out so that the important stays important.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
everybody then benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me think about just, what do you decide to take onto your plate? What do you decide to not take on? So the ever growing,
Yeah.
the ever enduring job of trying to create more simplicity.
Yeah. And learning the power of no and the fact that no
Right.
is a complete sentence.
Yes. No is a complete sentence. That's a good way to think about it.
Absolutely is. Hey, would you like to do this?
Yeah.
No, I would not. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, and here's
Well,
why. No, just
well,
no.
no, yeah, just no. So, Dean, it's so great to catch up. So, tell people how they can learn more about Manflow Yoga and find you.
Yeah, so kind of like we were talking about, I think the best way to try something is to do a short trial run of things. I've got a free 7-day challenge you can check out at manflowyoga.com/7DC, specifically a yoga beginners for men challenge. So no flexibility required, no yoga experience required, and lots of practical day-to-day
Mm-hmm.
topics that, most guys want more of. I'm on YouTube, youtube.com/manflowyoga, Instagram at manflowyoga, Facebook. Okay. And yeah, I'm on the internet. So
Well, yes, you're fairly easy to find what you provide, so I recommend it highly because it's very very beneficial and good. So,
yeah.
thank you so
Oh,
much, man.
I should mention the sexual wellness content
Yes,
because, you know, men, sexual wellness, it's an important thing.
yes,
Most guys over the age of 30 have had some sort of sexual fiasco isn't the right word, but some sexual frustration. So it's very
mm-hmm.
normal. Working on your core strength and working on breathing can help with that. So I've got a lot of stuff for that as well.
Yeah, it's really good. I've done several of them, so they're really really good. So, man, Dean, it's great to catch up, and all the best, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.